Hi, this is Tawny with the Kinsman Free Public Library today with a rather unusual book recommendation video. This recommendation video is going to be much longer than they normally are, as they are going to cover multiple books for multiple age groups, from adult to child. These books all cover the issues of racism and police brutality. We got an email asking for a display, but since we can't put up displays in the library for obvious reasons, we decided to do a couple videos. So today is nonfiction. Hopefully Monday we will have a novel version up as well for the age groups. Now, I'm mildly ashamed to admit I have only read one of the books I am going to recommend. So I myself have quite a bit of reading to do. So I'm just going to show you some of the books that I have found, as well as read a brief description of them so that you get a sense of what they are about. And then I will let you know which ones I am reading or which ones I have read. Okay, so for adult and teen, our first book is The Other Wes Moore by Wes Moore. The description is, two kids named Wes Moore were born blocks apart within a year of each other. Both grew up fatherless in similar Baltimore neighborhoods and had difficult childhoods. Both hung out on the street corners with their crew, and both ran into trouble with the police. How then did one grow up to be a Rhodes Scholar, decorated veteran, White House Fellow, and business leader, while the other ended up a convicted murderer serving a life sentence? Wes Moore, the author of this fascinating book, sets out to answer this question. The second one is Rising Out of Hatred by Eli Saslow. Derek Black grew up to be the epicenter of white nationalism. His father founded Stormfront, the largest racist community on the internet. His godfather, David Duke, was a KKK Grand Wizard. By the time Derek turned 19, he had become an elected politician with his own daily radio show, already regarded as the leading light of the burgeoning white nationalist movement. We can infiltrate, Derek once told a crowd of white nationalists. We can take the country back. Then he went to college. Derek had been homeschooled by his parents, steeped in the culture of white supremacy, and he had rarely encountered diverse perspectives or direct outrage against his beliefs. At New College of Florida, he continued to broadcast his radio show in secret each morning, living a double life until a classmate uncovered his identity and sent an email to the entire school. Derek Black, white supremacist, radio host, New College student. You Can't Touch My Hair and Other Things I Still Have to Explain. Phoebe Robinson. Being a black woman in America means contending with old prejudices and fresh absurdities each day. Comedian Phoebe Robinson has experienced her fair share over the years. She's been unceremoniously relegated to the role of the black friend, as if she is somehow the authority in all things racial. She's been questioned about her love of U2 and Billy Joel. Isn't that white people music? She's been called uppity for having an opinion in the workplace. She has been followed around stores by security guards, and yes, people do ask her whether they can touch her hair all the time. Now she's ready to take these topics to the page, and she's going to make you laugh as she's doing it. I have this book currently on hold, so I will be reading this book. But it is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Anti-racism is a transformative concept that reorients and re-energizes the conversation about racism, and even more fundamentally points us toward liberating new ways of thinking about ourselves and each other. At its core, racism is a powerful system that creates false hierarchies of human value. Its warped logic extends beyond race, from the way we regard people of different ethnicities or skin colors to the way we treat people of different sexes, gender identities, and body types. Racism intersects with class and culture and geography, and even changes the way we value ourselves. In How to Be an Anti-Racist, Kendi takes readers through a widening circle of anti-racist ideas, from the most basic concepts to visionary possibilities, that will help readers see all forms of racism clearly, understand their poisonous consequences, and work to oppose them in our system and in ourselves. Black Klansmen by Ron Stallworth, a memoir. When Detective Ron Stallworth, the first black detective in the history of the Colorado Springs Police Department, comes across a classified ad in the local paper asking for all those interested in joining the Ku Klux Klan to contact a P.O. box, Detective Stallworth does his job and responds with interest, using his real name while posing as a white man. He figures he'll receive a few brochures in the mail, maybe even a magazine, and learn more about a growing terrorist threat in his community. White Fragility: Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, by Robin DiAngelo. In this vital, necessary, and beautiful book, anti-racist educator Robin DiAngelo deftly illuminates the phenomenon of white fragility and allows us to understand racism as a practice not restricted to bad people. Referring to the defensive moves that white people make when challenged racially, white fragility is characterized by emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and by behaviors including argumentation and silence. When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrice Kahn Colors and Ashley Bendeley. Raised by a single mother in an impoverished neighborhood in Los Angeles, Patrice Kahn Colors experienced firsthand the prejudice and persecution Black Americans endure at the hands of law enforcement. For Patrice, the most vulnerable people in the country are Black people, deliberately and ruthlessly targeted by a criminal justice system serving white privilege agenda. Black people are subjected to unjustifiable racial profiling and police brutality. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Ulo writes-fed reporting on aspects of white supremacy from police brutality to the mass incarceration of African Americans have made it impossible to ignore the issue of race. Still, it is a difficult subject to talk about. How do you tell your roommate her jokes are racist? Why did your sister-in-law take umbrage when you ask to touch her hair? And how do you make it right? How do you explain white privilege to your white privileged friends? Stamped from the Beginning: The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi. Some Americans cling desperately to the myth that we are living in a post-racial society, that the election of the first Black president spelled the doom of racism. In fact, racist thought is alive and well in America, more sophisticated and more insidious than ever. I have read this book. It's strong and it's very powerful. It is They Called Themselves the KKK: The Birth of an American Terrorist Group by Susan Campbell Bartoletti. This book covers the whole history of the KKK and its impact on the civil rights movement. It's definitely worth a read. It's geared towards young adults, but that also makes it very easy to understand. And then finally, for teens and adult, we have Stonewall: Breaking Out in the Fight for Gay Rights by Ann Bosman. Now, it might seem funny to include this particular book, but Stonewall and the gay rights movement was actually given birth by a Black trans woman. So it's imperative that this is also brought into the conversation. And then now, kids. So this is going to be a mixture of picture books and novels as well. The first one is Hands Up by Brianna J. McDaniel. A young Black girl lifts her baby hands up to greet the sun, reaches her hands up for a book on a high shelf, and raises her hands up in praise at a church service. She stretches her hands up high like a plane's wing and whizzes down a hill so fast on her bike with her hands way up. As she grows, she lives through everyday moments of joy, love, and sadness. And when she gets a little older, she joins together with her family and her community in a protest march where they lift their hands up together in resistance and strength. Separate is Never Equal by Sylvia Mendez. This story covers the Brown versus the Board of Education case, where separate is deemed equal, and the issues of desegregation and segregation as well. Kids, I Have a Dream by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This book is written Sorry. This book covers his speech on the Lincoln Memorial during August of 1963. 12 Days in May, Freedom Ride 1961, Larry Dane Bremner. I did read this one as well. It covers the group of people. It says 13 black and white civil rights activists. They were on their way down south to help black African American and black individuals sign up to vote. They were met with hostility and violence along the way. The Soccer Fence. This book takes place in South Africa during the apartheid, but a lot of the same themes are relevant to now and current situations. Ruth and the Green Book by Calvin Alexander Ramsey. If you don't know what a green book is, a green book lists all the places it was safe for people of color to stop or where it was unsafe for them to stop after a certain time of day, specifically in these quote-unquote sundown towns where it would be incredibly unsafe to be found after sundown. Strange the Fruit by Billie Holiday and the Power of a Protest Song, Gary Golio and Charlotte Riley Webb. Discover how two outsiders, Billie Holiday, a young black woman raised in poverty, and Abel Meeropol, the son of Jewish immigrants, combined their talents to create a song that challenged racism and paved the way for the civil rights movement. People Who Say No, Courage Against Oppression, Laura Scandifio. Sometimes it's okay to ignore the rules or break the law. In fact, it's essential. This thought-provoking book features people who did just that. Sophie and Hans Scholl, siblings who distributed anti-governmental pamphlets in Nazi Germany, and Andrei Sakharov, who helped develop the nuclear bomb in Cold War Russia, but then spoke out against its use. Some, like Rosa Parks, were not originally in positions of political power, but came out of the ranks of regular citizens to stand up for human rights. Also included are Helen Suzman, a South African member of parliament who fought apartheid, Aung San Suu Kyi, who spent years under house arrest for protesting the dictatorship in Burma and the people of Egypt, who recently brought down the repressive government of Hosni Mubarak. These inspirational profiles of people who followed their moral compass makes for a riveting story, as well as excellent starting points for the discussions about ethics and morality. Let the Children March. Monica Clark Robinson and Frank Morrison. In 1963, Birmingham, Alabama, thousands of African American children volunteered to march for their civil rights after hearing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak. They protested the laws that kept black people separate from white people. Facing fear, hate, and danger, these children used their voice to change the world. My Daddy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by Martin Luther King Jr. What was it like growing up as the son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? This memoir by Martin Luther King Jr. III provides insight into one of history's most fascinating families and into one special bond between father and son. Betty Before X by Elisa Chavez and Renee Watson. In Detroit, 1945, 11-year-old Betty's house doesn't quite feel like home. She believes her mother loves her, but she can't shake the feeling that her mother doesn't want her. Church helps those worries fade, if only for a little while. The singing, the preaching, the speeches from guest activists like Paul Robeson and Thurgood Marshall stir African Americans in their community to stand up for their rights. Alright, thanks for listening. I will be providing list of books down below for you guys to read, as well as extra resources. Bye!